personally involved in cooking or preparing or planning a Thanksgiving meal this year. We have been invited to go and eat with my family in Toronto tomorrow. I'm definitely looking forward to it. But I must say entirely that I don't have to think and plan that kind of meal in these present times. Because I'm very much aware that to do that these days is almost like walking out into a minefield. Let me show you what I mean. The mother of 4, grandmother of 7, looked out upon her Thanksgiving table. Everything was now finally in place, and she hoped to heaven that this time everyone would be happy with what she had prepared. She looked at the platter on which would sit her turkey this year. Oh, it had to be a turkey. You couldn't get around that. If there was no turkey, Uncle Fred would make a huge scene. But ever since 2 years ago, and Ray's extended lecture on the evils of factory farming, finding and selecting a turkey had become a major job. It had taken research, it had taken legwork, but she believed she had succeeded. She had been able to obtain for her table a turkey that was free-range, organically fed. She went out to the farm to meet it, checked its pedigree. In fact, she was almost certain that there had never been a turkey in the history of the world that had lived as happy and fulfilled a life as the turkey that would grace her table this year. At least up until the last little bit. So she was pretty sure that this year Ray would be happy with the turkey that she had prepared. Of course, none of that would make Pat happy at all. And Pat would, in fact, take great glee in informing everyone who took even one serving of turkey that it didn't matter how happy the bird had been, eating meat was murder. Well, for Pat, she had prepared the soba noodle and then the dame casserole with fried tofu. Everyone else would avoid that one like the plague. So their meat was a vague story, but it was only part of the story. For example, this year she had somehow managed to put together a stuffing that contained no fat, no gluten, no nuts, no raisins, no taste, no texture, and she hoped that nobody would notice that. But that's how it had gone, and it was just about everything on her table, from the lactose-free mashed potatoes to the organic pumpkin pie sweetened with Nutriseed. Everything had taken extra effort. But she was pretty sure that this time she finally had something that everyone could be pleased with. Of course, she was completely wrong. My question is this: how did this happen? How did we go in what really seems like a short time to a place where everyone could gather around a big feast table and be united, to a place where it all seems to divide us? I don't know, when I was growing up 20 or so years ago, I don't remember all these divisions. I mean, sure, we knew about some dietary restrictions. We knew that Jews, for example, ate very differently from other people. We may have encountered the odd person here or there who had severe food reactions or allergies. But there weren't that many. We heard about vegetarians, maybe even vegans, but few people actually knew one. They were few and far between. But today, it seems, you cannot plan a meal, a large meal of people coming together without taking very careful considerations of everybody's dietary choices and restrictions. And I'm not complaining. I mean, I understand. they realize that there are some people who really do have very severe reactions to certain foods, even life-threatening reactions. You got to respect that. I also have serious concerns about our food supply and what happens to animals in factory farms, for example. I do eat meat. I love turkey. I can't imagine doing without meat at all, and yet I do have nothing but respect for those who, for principled reasons, make that choice to eat vegetarian or even vegan. I understand all of these differences and where they have come from, and yet it just seems to me that we've gone through this enormous change in a very short time in our culture. And I gotta wonder, are we the first people, the first culture in the history of the world to go through such a rapid change around diet and food? And what is the effect of this? Well, of course we're not. In fact, I imagine that divisions and separations based on food choices are about as old as culture itself. And we have a wonderful example, of course, in the Bible. One of the oldest, best-known cases of people being divided by food. Basically, God came to the people of Israel and said, if you want to be my people, you have to eat in certain ways. You cannot eat certain foods. You must eat others. And so Jews were famous in the ancient world for their strange choices around food, that they could not eat food that other people found perfectly acceptable. But the strange thing about all of these dietary restrictions, and we read, by the way, only the smallest portion of those dietary food laws from the book of Leviticus this morning. You can be thankful for that. It's Thanksgiving. The list goes on and on and on about all the things you can eat and all the things you can't eat. But the strange thing about this diet, as it's very carefully laid out, is there's really no reason given for it. No practical reason. Some people have since thought that, well, perhaps it had something to do with food safety in the ancient world. That maybe in the ancient world, foods like pork were more dangerous before the invention of refrigeration and other ways of preserving food. Well, that may be. But if it is true, the Bible betrays no knowledge of it. Certainly does not mention this as a reason for eating this way. In fact, the only reason that is given for this long, complex diet is this. You shall be holy, God says, for I, the Lord, your God, am holy. What it's saying is this. God is special. God is unique. God is unlike all the other gods who are not really even gods. And so God's people, the people that God has chosen, have to be special and unique and different as well. And one of the key ways of doing that is through what they eat and don't eat. And basically, the point of the Bible diet was to separate the Jews from all the other people around them. Because when you do not eat a certain food because you find it to be unclean and disgusting and detestable, and those were the kinds of words the Jews used for the foods they would not eat, well then how can you possibly sit down next to someone who eats those kinds of things that you find disgusting and detestable? You can't. You cannot be with them, you cannot eat next to them, they will contaminate you. And so the effect of this was that Jews could not connect with other people because, you see, eating together is one of the age-old ways of bringing people together. If you have a problem with someone else, the best thing to do, invite them over for a meal and eat with them. You get to know them. You understand them better, you forge a friendship. In the ancient world, the way of creating an alliance was simply to get together, meet, talk, and eat together. An alliance in the ancient world could not be concluded without a feast. Because food brings people together. It's supposed to. But when people begin to take their identity from their severe dietary restrictions, that gets messed up. And food, which has this wonderful potential to bring people together, begins to separate them and divide them. And that was actually the intention of these food laws in the Old Testament, to set the Jews apart from everybody else, to make sure they did not talk with others, or make alliances with others, or marry others. It was to be apart, to be special to people. So food, though it should draw us together, definitely can tear us apart. This was a great problem, not only for the Jews, but it was also a problem for the early church. The early church, very early on, began to attract both Jews and Gentiles into the life of the church. Both Jews and Gentiles could belong. But naturally, these people, as they came into the life of the church, wanted to keep eating as they had always done. And so in these early churches, you had people over here, Jewish Christians, who were looking over there at these Gentile Christians and calling what they were eating disgusting and detestable and unclean. It created huge divisions in the church. And in some places, it got even more complicated than that. And one of those places was the city of Rome. Very early on, there was a Christian church in Rome. And it ran into a big problem. Rome was the capital of the world. It was a city filled with temples dedicated to various gods from all over the world. And all of these gods, these Christians saw as false gods, idols, not worthy of being recognized. But they also had a problem. Because of all of these temples, every single piece of meat that was available in the city of Rome had been slaughtered in one or the other of those temples, because ancient temples were slaughterhouses. And so the priests would bring in these animals, they would slaughter them, they would take portions for themselves, and the priests always had more food than they could possibly eat. And so they sold it off in meat markets all throughout the city. This created a problem for the Christians, because they looked at it and said, well, this meat has been dedicated to some god that I don't think is God. And so because of this, some Christians, very principled, said, I don't want to honor those gods, I'm not going to eat meat. Because the only meat available has been dedicated to gods, I don't want to honor them, I will only eat vegetables. And so you had vegetarian Christians in Rome. For reasons of for theological reasons, not for dietary reasons. And yet at the same time there were other Christians who said, well, yeah, but they're not real gods. I don't believe in them. They're nothing. So what do I care if some meat has been designated to them? The meat is delicious. I like it. I'm going to eat it because I'm free as a follower of Jesus. And so you had a division in the church in Rome between vegetarians and meat eaters. So Paul wrote to them. He wrote to them to address this problem among many others. And I think he addressed them with great wisdom. Wisdom that still speaks to us today. First thing he said was this: who are you? Who are you to pass judgment on the servants of another? It is before their own Lord that they stand or fall. Who are you is always a great place to start. Judgment. He's saying judgment doesn't help the situation. That's always true. Leave the judgment up to God. Whenever there's a disagreement or a problem, leave the judgment up to God. But I think this is all the more important when it comes to dietary differences. Because it's so easy to make fun of others. Make fun of vegetarians, maybe, because of their choices. Or maybe for vegetarians to look at meat eaters and call them disgusting. It's so judgment and to tear ourselves apart. Paul says it can't be done. Leave the judgment up to God. Everyone stands before God on their own. But that alone is not going to solve the issue. Because you need something that's going to transcend those differences, something that's going to overcome it. So Paul goes on. Those who eat, he says, eat in honor of the Lord, since they give thanks to God. Well, those who abstain in honor of the Lord and give thanks to God. So we may eat very differently. We may have very different opinions on many different things. But what he's saying is we have one thing in common. All who eat, no matter what they eat, are eating the produce of the land. It is given by God. And so all can and must be thankful. See, that's what this is about. This is about the power of Thanksgiving. That's what this festival is about. And I'm sorry to blow your bubble, but this festival is not about turkey. And it's not about stuffing, and it's not about gravy, and it's not even about pumpkin pie. It's about an attitude. And it is an attitude that has the power to transform any gathering, family or otherwise. Who here has not been in a situation, a gathering of people, maybe a family, maybe of other people, but people who come together and everyone who's there is only thinking of themselves, of their needs, of their desires, of their wants. A gathering like that can very quickly become a gathering filled with grumbling and murmuring and complaining, even fighting. It's about division, separation. But an attitude of thanksgiving is transformative. Sociologists have looked at this on individual people's lives. You know, people who go through this life, this has been documented, who go through this life with an attitude of gratitude, who look at what they have, not with, oh, this is what I'm missing, but thankful for whatever they do have, are necessarily more happy, more joyful in their lives. It changes your perspective, and so it changes you. Well, it's the same thing with the gathering. The attitude of thanksgiving that we come in with, that we pray with, that we speak with, can transform that situation. Maybe there was a time, I don't know, maybe there was a time when families came together and maybe they suppressed their differences. They put them all aside, pretended to all like the same thing so that everyone got along. There were no divisions, no separations, and it created a kind of surface harmony, which was maybe fine. But we seem to be in a place now where that's not working. And we need to find another better basis for our harmony. An attitude of thanksgiving. Looking at what we have with that attitude of thanksgiving can transform our gatherings and ourselves in that way. Let's take a few moments to silence.